Hey, it's Captain Matt, Boater's Secret Weapon, back again for National Safe Boating Week, and today we're talking about VHF radios. It can be your last line of defense to call for help in an emergency situation. It can also be valuable for a number of other reasons, which we'll talk about. But it's one of the things that intimidates, or maybe there's a lot of confusion with many pleasure boaters. So let's talk about the functionality of your VHF radio. This is a handheld. We also have the fixed mount that we'll talk about. They do virtually the same thing, but a few different decisions you need to make when picking them out. So let's talk about how they work first. Well, these are a line of sight communication device, which means that the signal is sent from this antenna to the other antenna, and it's based on how far that signal can go without being interrupted by obstacles or by the curvature of the earth. So the distance is going to be impacted by the wattage and the height of the antenna from this antenna to the other antenna. The higher they are, the further they'll go across that curvature of the earth. We'll talk about those distances in just a little bit. So the other thing that you need to know about your VHF radio is it's a public source of communication, which means you're talking from you to everybody else that's in the line of sight in the radius around your antenna. So it's not like your cell phone where it's a conversation between you and the other person. There are likely other people that are hearing your conversation, so keep it courteous, keep it appropriate, and also keep it short because other people are using those channels for their conversation as well. Now, one of the things that you want to do is to be courteous is to make sure you don't talk over other people. If you're on a channel, make sure you listen for a couple of seconds to see if anybody else is talking, and then go ahead and press your talk button and talk, and make sure you release your button. Make sure your button's not sticking. Another thing you need to know are the channels. You have channel 16, which is what almost every radio in the US and Canada is going to default to. That's the emergency and hailing channel, which means if you need assistance, if you're in an emergency situation, you go to channel 16. It's usually going to be a red button. You can just press it and it'll go right there. And you can call. The Coast Guard's going to monitor that. As a boater, you're responsible for monitoring channel 16, so you should always have your radio dialed to 16. Maybe you have the functionality that it can scan through channels and monitor multiple channels at once, which is great. But you're monitoring that to lend assistance if there's a distressed boater, and you can be a good Samaritan boater to come help them out. That channel 16, though, is only for short conversations and for emergencies. So if you need to call a mayday, a pon-pon, or a securite, and those kind of go up from mayday being, hey, we are in dire need and it's a life-threatening situation. Pon-pon is, hey, things are bad and they seem to be getting worse and we likely need help. And then a securite is, hey, in this area, here's something that other boaters should be aware of. A log or a container floating in the water. Maybe a buoy has gotten dragged and is out of position. Or there's something that's going on in the area that other boaters need to be aware of, and that's a securite call. We talk about these in another video when I go to a lot of detail, which you can check out on our YouTube channel at A Boat by Our Secret Weapon. So channel 16, not only is it emergency, but it's also the hailing channel. If you want to call another boater, you can call them on 16. What you're going to do is you're going to say who you are, and then you're going to identify the boat that you're trying to get in touch with. It could be the name on the back of the boat, or the type and style of boat and the location and the direction it's heading. That's going to be something as they're monitoring 16, they'll recognize their vessel and they will respond. And what you want to do is you want to give them a communication channel for pleasure boaters to go to. So you may call them up and say, you know, 48 Sea Ray, this is 22 pontoon heading southbound on the Intercoastal Waterway, and go to channel 72. Or if you're calling your buddy, you call your buddy and say, hey, whatever their boat name is, this is you, go to channel 68. And some of those pleasure channels, 68, 69, 71, and 72, they vary by location as to what's what. So you might want to ask around at your marina and do a little research locally. But those are non-commercial channels. All the other channels kind of have their own designation. 22A being the Coast Guard channel, that's only for them. They're obviously going to be monitoring 16. And channel 9 is likely the channel you use to talk to a bridge tender if you need a bridge raised to get access to another part of the water. Now, another piece of functionality that's super important for safety is this little red door that you open up, and there's a button in there. Take a look. That is the DCS button. Now, what that is for is a quick emergency distress call. You can open up the door, hold that button down for a couple of seconds, and what it's going to do is it's going to send your GPS location and some other information out via the special DCS channel, which is monitored by the Coast Guard, but it's essentially a text message that's going to go out. It's got a great range, and it's a great thing to have access to, with the caveat, you have to set it up first for it to be functional. When you turn the radio on that's not set up, it's going to give you a warning that says you need to program your MMSI number. That's a specific number that you register. You can do it for free via a couple of different websites. Boat US does it, as well as America's Boating Club will do that. But what you'll do is you'll register your vessel with your radio, and you'll get an MMSI number, and you'll plug that number into your radio. You can do one MMSI number per vessel, but multiple radios, because you'll have your handheld, you may have a fixed mount, you may have multiple radios that you have on board, and they can all have the same MMSI number, but you have to register that first for this functionality to be there. And it really could be the difference between life and death. So take the time. It's free to do if you use those services, and you can register that. It's going to give you a is it a 9-digit? Yes, a 9-digit number that's going to identify your vessel. You tell them the description of your vessel, your information, and so when you push that button, not only is it going to send your GPS coordinates, but it's going to send all those other details so they know exactly what to look for and where to look for it. It can speed up the response time considerably. Now, if you bought your boat used and it had a fixed mount VHF or even a handheld that came with it, and there was an MMSI number programmed into those, you need to go through a procedure to disconnect that one from the boat and now get your own. So you have to register for a new one, but you'll have to go through a process to disconnect the old one and then connect the new one so it has the new information for you for that vessel to your radios. And then another tip is, before you click that save button, make sure you double, triple, quadruple check that the number you typed in, that 9-digit MMSI number, is 100% accurate, because it can be very difficult to get that changed if you make a mistake. So plug it into all your radios so that it's there and that functionality is there if you need it. It's also going to eliminate that annoying error message that pops up when you first turn your radio on. Now, if you're looking at a fixed mount VHF, this is where you need to also consider what type of antenna is going to be best. For the fixed mount, you've got the similar functionality with channel 16, channel 9 for bridges, 68, 69, 71, 72 for that communication. Don't talk over everybody. Be courteous. It's open airways. They work the same. But one advantage is to the fixed mount is you've got power to the battery, which is going to give you a little bit better wattage that you have access to. And you also are going to have the ability to put a whip antenna up that's going to raise the height at which you're sending your signal. Remember, the height of your antenna is going to give you a longer range, so that adds some extra safety. The problem is, if something happens to the vessel and the boat's going down, or you lose power, now you don't have a VHF radio, so you still need that portable. So I like to, in a lot of situations, if I'm operating at the coast, if I'm going offshore at all, I want to have that redundancy of the higher power to reach when necessary, but a backup if I need to abandon ship or if I lose power for some reason, and maybe even multiple. With the portable, I like the floatable and the waterproof. And don't forget to attach your strap, because if I'm in the water, this is going to allow me to not lose my radio versus just holding on to it. If it's floatable and it gets in the water somehow, it's gonna be accessible. But that strap, don't skip that step of attaching that strap, because you usually have to attach it when they're brand new. Make sure it's charged up. Make sure you watch. We've got the other video on how to call your maydays. But the taller the antenna, the more reach you're going to have. It's also why when you head out, Put your antenna in the full 90-degree position, straight up and down. Get that as high as it can. Now, you may have to put it back to get into your slip or for storage, but make sure they're on a quick ratchet. Make sure you ratchet that straight up, because you're not going to have time to do those types of things when you're in a stress situation. You also want to periodically check that your connections are secure. You can do radio checks on those public communication channels. There's usually somebody in your marina. And you'll also have the ability to switch wattage from the full maybe 25 watts down to 5 or 6 watts, maybe 2.5 or 1 watt, which is going to shrink your radius. When you're doing your radio checks, you don't want to be taking up those airways from a potential emergency. So go down to your lowest wattage. It's usually just a button on your fixed mount. Drop that down to the lowest wattage and do your radio check, preferably not on 16, preferably do it on another channel with another boater that is on that channel. Likely you can find somebody to help you out with that. Now, when we're talking handheld radios, you want to make sure that you keep these charged. This one has a nice mounting stand. You can also disconnect it, and it just has a cord to it that you can plug right in. But make sure before you head out that you have your radio charged up and ready to go, so that if you do get in a situation, you have the power of this radio working. Again, I like the floatable, I like the waterproof, and I want to make sure I'm attaching my my wrist strap there. And then take the time to learn the functionality, whether it's a handheld or a fixed mount. Make sure there's a lot of functionality on here, like the weather channel. You can go to the weather channel.
Carolinas. The current time is 6:43 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
And it will give you an up-to-date weather forecast. It's great before you go out on a trip, you can play that, but it's also great to monitor. Just put it on the weather channel and check it periodically when you're offshore to make sure you don't get caught in bad weather. But you may have other functionality as well. We talked about the MMSI number, but you've got your GPS coordinates on most newer models. You may have an FM radio. You may have some ability to program in different stations, different channels, so you can easily go to 68 or 72 or whatever the preferred channel for communication in your area. Bridges, if you need to talk to bridges. There also is likely a man overboard button that you can easily just, if something happens and somebody falls overboard, you can easily mark a spot, and that way you know exactly, do your Williamson turn or do your turn and come back to pick them up. You know exactly where they are. If anything happens, you automatically hit that button, and then you keep an eye on them to go back and pick them up. You have waypoints that you can oftentimes plug in if there's destinations you go to frequently, that you know what those GPS coordinates are. And then we mentioned the DCS functionality, which you have to program beforehand, get that MMSI number set up, and it's not too difficult to go through that process, but you just have to take the time to do it. This VHF radio, don't take it for granted. It's an important piece of safety equipment when you need it. And like all safety equipment, when you need it, you need it. And if it's dead, if the connections aren't great, if your antenna's not up, if you didn't program your MMSI number in there properly, if you don't know how to use it, it's going to make everything more stressful. Get comfortable with this. This can be a valuable tool in your boating toolbox. Down below, you can check out all of the VHF radios. I've got the standard Horizon. We also have the Icom, which is another very popular brand. Get the one that's right for you, and then learn how to use it. Remember, life truly is better on a boat.